The Austrian father, accused of holding his daughter captive and raping her thousands of times over 2 decades, has been sentenced to life in prison. On Thursday, a jury convicted Josef Fritzl of all charges against him, including incest and murder.
This is Elisabeth and her 7 children. This is Fritzl, Elisabeth's father. However, the unusual aspect here is that Fritzl is also the father of the 7 children Elisabeth gave birth to. In today's video, let's explore the most controversial incest case in Austrian history, the case of Elisabeth Fritzl. I'm Shannon8X. Welcome to Cold Case Killers. Elisabeth was born on April 6, 1966, as the daughter of Josef Fritzl and Rosemarie. Josef married Rosemarie in 1956 when she was 17 and he was 21. They had 7 children together, with Elisabeth being the 4th. After completing compulsory education at the age of 15, Elisabeth began training to become a waitress. She had a youthful and adventurous spirit. In January 1983, she left home and ran away to Vienna with a co-worker. Fortunately, she was found by the police within 3 weeks and had to return to her parents in Amstetten. This incident made her father, Josef Fritzl, extremely angry, and she was perceived as a rebellious child, unlike her siblings. Upon her return, Elisabeth was forced by her father to resume her waitress training, which she completed in 1984. She was then offered a job near her home. On that morning, Elisabeth's father, Fritzl, was busy working on machinery in the cellar. Her mother and younger sister went shopping, while her other siblings were allowed by Fritzl to go out and play. It was a rare occasion for Elisabeth to be allowed to go out with her friends, so she quickly left the house. By noon, when Elisabeth's mother and siblings returned home, they didn't find her there. As the afternoon wore on and Fritzl left the cellar, Elisabeth still hadn't returned. At this point, everyone was worried, but Elisabeth's father was particularly angry, believing she had left home again. With Elisabeth still missing, her mother frantically searched and asked around, eventually resorting to calling the police. For weeks afterward, Elisabeth remained missing, causing her family to prepare themselves for the worst. Unexpectedly, the family received a letter postmarked from Brno, allegedly from Elisabeth. In the letter, she claimed to be tired of family life and had run away with a friend, warning her parents not to look for her or she would leave the country. This confirmed Fritzl's suspicions. Fritzl told the police he didn't know where his daughter had gone, but suspected she had joined a cult, as she had mentioned before. Disheartened and frustrated by Elisabeth's actions, the local police closed the case of Elisabeth's disappearance. From then on, Elisabeth became a tainted name in Fritzl's eyes, as well as in the eyes of her family and the community, who preferred not to mention her. It all began on a seemingly ordinary day in May 1993, when Fritzl's wife was getting ready to go to the market early, as per his request. She was startled to discover a baby girl lying in a cardboard box outside their house. In her panic about what to do with the child, Fritzl noticed a piece of paper with a note from Elisabeth, asking them to take care of her daughter named Lisa. Upon seeing her daughter's handwriting, Elisabeth's mother burst into tears, but was immensely relieved when Fritzl agreed to adopt Elisabeth's abandoned child. The surprises continued when in December 1994, Elisabeth's mother once again found another baby girl named Monica, placed in a stroller outside their home's entrance. Shortly after, she received a phone call from Elisabeth, who hoped that her mother would take care of Monica. Despite Elisabeth's peculiar way of speaking, her mother was happy to welcome the child into their home for care. However, it was then that she realized how Elisabeth had obtained her new phone number to contact her. Feeling uneasy, she immediately contacted the police, but they dismissed her concerns as overthinking. Then in mid-1998, Fritzl found Elisabeth's 3rd child, a boy named Alexander, outside their house. The police and local authorities actively helped Fritzl and his wife go through the legal process of becoming legal guardians for Elisabeth's children without any suspicion. The entire neighborhood admired the children and praised Fritzl and his wife for their warm love for their grandchildren. For 14 years, Fritzl's small family remained peaceful until a series of events unfolded, exposing a dark secret to the light. Fritzl repeatedly insisted to his relatives not to venture down to the basement where he worked, fearing they would damage his tools. Later in the afternoon, Fritzl unexpectedly returned home with a young girl named Kirsten and a letter from Elisabeth. The letter begged her parents to help save Kirsten, Elisabeth's 19-year-old daughter. Immediately, Kirsten was rushed to the hospital amidst the family's anxiety and confusion. Due to Fritzl's haste, he hadn't fully explained to them why he had encountered Kirsten. However, at the hospital, Kirsten's medical records consisted only of Elisabeth's letter and Fritzl's account, which struck the medical staff as peculiar. Over the course of a week, police grew suspicious and directly interrogated Kirsten about her family, but she had no family to speak of. Ultimately, they began to suspect Fritzl and reopened the investigation into Elisabeth's mysterious disappearance. They revisited Elisabeth's letters to the Fritzls and detected inconsistencies. Finally, the truth unraveled when doctors couldn't determine the cause of Kirsten's illness. Police suggested they must reach out to Kirsten's mother. They issued a public appeal through the media for Elisabeth to come forward and provide information about Kirsten's medical history. Under pressure from the police, on the morning of April 26, 2008, Elisabeth returned home with her 2 children and the joy of her mother. Fritzl himself went to pick up his daughter and grandchildren. He informed his wife that after more than 24 years of absence, Elisabeth had decided to come home. Before Elisabeth and her mother could have any conversation, Fritzl took Elisabeth to the hospital to care for Kirsten. That evening, as soon as the 2 stepped into the hospital, they were immediately detained by the police. Fritzl told the police that Elisabeth had joined a cult from the town of Chemnitz, according to the most recent letter he received. The police contacted a church official and a cult expert, who raised doubts about the existence of the cult described by Fritzl. As for Elisabeth, since being detained, she hadn't uttered a word. After being persuaded by the police many times, Elisabeth finally revealed a secret to them that even they couldn't have imagined, under the condition that they had to protect her and the children. Since she was a teenager, Elisabeth had dreamed of leaving her family. She revealed to the police that there was no sect, nor was it because she was in love with anyone, but it's all because of her father. Fritzl began sexually abusing Elisabeth when she was 11 years old, 1977. That morning, there was no one else in the house except Elisabeth and her father, and this was also something she was very afraid of. She did not like being alone with Fritzl. Suddenly, Fritzl asked Elisabeth to go down to the basement to help him carry a door to the garage. However, when Elisabeth got there, he covered her face with a towel soaked in anesthetic, causing her to faint. He then dragged Elisabeth into the cellar that she later learned he had prepared months before. Here, he used rope to tie her up. On the second day, the incest continued to wrap the noose around Elisabeth's waist, tightly squeezing her right in the room where she was locked. Fritzl came to the secret room almost every day, or at least 3 times a week, bringing food and other items, and repeatedly raped her. And the scariest thing is that Elisabeth gave birth to 7 children during her imprisonment. In those 7 childbirths, Elisabeth received no medical assistance whatsoever, nor was she given any pain relief medication. Elisabeth's first child died shortly after birth in November 1986, and she miscarried at 10 weeks gestation. She was even abandoned completely when giving birth to Kirsten on August 30th, 1988. At that time, Elisabeth cried bitterly as she recalled the scene of her giving birth in the cellar on a dirty blanket, and was only given a childbirth book 2 months prior. Only at the last minute was she given an additional blanket. The only tools she had were scissors and a few diapers. 10 days after she gave birth, Fritzl finally visited the child. On February 1st, 1990, Stefan was born. On August 29, 1992, Lisa was born. On February 26, 1994, Monica was born. On April 28, 1996, Elisabeth gave birth to twin boys. One child died before he was 3 days old and was cremated by Fritzl. The surviving child was named Alexander. On December 16, 2002, Felix was born. The children, along with Elisabeth, survived on minimal food and water that Fritzl brought down each week. In those dark circumstances, driven by a mother's instinct, Elisabeth still tried to educate her children with the knowledge she had acquired during her 18 years above ground, wanting to provide them with as normal a life as possible in that horrific situation. There was no heating or fresh air. Around them were only walls and one window. The cellar was dark, damp, and foul-smelling. Electricity often went out for hours, sometimes even days. There was no light, lamps, or candles. When there was no electricity, they also lost water and couldn't cook hot meals. The damp conditions caused mold to grow on the walls, and the cellar was infested with mice. Not only that, Elisabeth recalled that Fritzl forced her to watch pornographic videos. Then he forced her to reenact the scene in front of her children to humiliate her. Elisabeth endured 24 years in that horrific hell. There were times when she thought she might die, but for the sake of her children, she remained resilient and tried to survive. It wasn't until Kirsten's health became critically endangered that Elisabeth begged Fritzl to allow her to take the sick child to the hospital. And you know the rest of the story. Returning to the time when Elisabeth reported the situation to the police, on the night of April 27, 2008, Elisabeth and her children, along with her mother, were taken into care by the authorities. During that time, the police found a way into the basement room where Elisabeth had been held captive for 24 years and gathered a lot of crucial evidence. With tireless work, the police had DNA evidence confirming that Fritzl was the biological father of his daughter's children to prove incest.
Prison officials say the 73-year-old man is under a suicide watch and will be taken to a psychiatric ward. He won't be eligible for parole for at least 15 years, and even then, judges and experts would have to sign off on his release. Elisabeth and her 6 surviving children have spent the last several months recovering at a secret location.
But Fritzl was so unethical that he claimed that his behavior towards his daughter did not constitute rape, but was consensual. He thought he must create a place where he could keep Elisabeth, by force if necessary, away from the outside world. The deeper the police investigated Fritzl, the more serious problems he discovered. Police said that Fritzl had been in prison for harassment, was a possible suspect in 2 murder cases, and that he had even imprisoned his mother to death in the attic of the house. I will leave this information in more detail below in the comments section. Finally, on March 19, 2009, after a 4-day trial in the town of St. Polten, and at the age of 72, Fritzl pleaded guilty to the negligent murder of his infant son, Michael, as well as decades of enslavement, incest, rape, coercion, and illegal confinement of his daughter, Elisabeth, and was sentenced to life imprisonment. Then Fritzl was transferred from Vienna to Stein prison in the city of Krems, 50 kilometers west of the Austrian capital. He was placed in a special area for mentally abnormal prisoners who are still responsible for their crimes. Stein has measures in place to protect Fritzl from attacks by other inmates, as well as its own medical facilities. Fritzl expressed a desire to be transferred to Garsten prison near his home in Amstetten, but his family objected. As for Elisabeth, she will live a secluded life with her 6 children in a house provided by her brother in a remote village. This village is kept secret and referred to by the nickname Village X. The local church's representative stated that it is a suitable place for the 42-year-old woman to start anew. But the relationship between Elisabeth and her mother was not as smooth as before. There is a theory that she also knew that Elisabeth was locked in the basement, but was too afraid of Fritzl to report it to the police. Because anyway, as a housewife, couldn't she have never stepped into that basement once in 24 years? The Fritzl case garnered significant media attention and has been the subject of numerous documentaries and books. These include The Longest Night, Secrets of the Austrian Cellar in 2008, and Monster, the Josef Fritzl story in 2010. Books like The Crimes of Josef Fritzl, Uncovering the Truth by Stephanie Marsh and Boyan Pansevsky in 2009, and Secrets in the Cellar by John Glatt, also in 2009, provide in-depth coverage of the case. Additionally, Emma Donoghue novel Room drew inspiration from the crimes, resulting in a film adaptation of the same name. In 2021, Lifetime released Girl in the Basement, a film inspired by the Fritzl case, as part of its Ripped from the Headlines feature film series. Directed by Elizabeth Rome, the film stars Stephanie Scott, Judd Nelson, and Jolie Fisher. The international community and public opinion strongly condemned the Fritzl case, labeling it one of the most horrifying crimes in criminal history. Josef Fritzl's brutal and cruel actions were denounced, and there was astonishment and fear that such atrocities could occur in modern society. Criticism has also been directed towards the Austrian government and justice system for their handling of the case. While Fritzl was convicted and imprisoned, there has been debate over whether justice was adequately served and how the aftermath of the case was managed. Some argue that Fritzl's punishment was not severe enough, while others question the decision to transfer him to a regular prison. Also during that time, advocacy groups and organizations advocating for victims' rights continued to monitor and provide support for the Fritzl family's recovery, while also proposing measures to prevent similar incidents in the future.